a fight that keeps me up at night, especially as a Charles Oliveira fan. I have nightmares about this fight. I have nightmares about Charles Oliveira getting absolutely flatlined. And this fight, guys, just makes me uncomfortable. It really does make me uncomfortable. I'll wake up, I'll have breakfast, I'll go to the gym, I'll start working on some videos. And, during the day, I just start to think about, man, how is that Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan fight going to play out? And I start thinking about the possibilities, and my brain just gets filled with brain fog. Like I can't really make up my mind. I go back and forth, and I feel like this is a fight where, whether you're on the Arman side or whether you're on the Charles Oliveira side, it's hard to be really confident on. And I honestly think it's crazy how big of a favorite Arman Tsarukyan is going into this fight. In my opinion, this should probably be a pick'em fight, but this is high level MMA. And if we know anything, is that anything could really happen on any given night. Arman Tsarukyan is a solid fighter. He's explosive on the feet, has a versatile kicking game, has nasty ground and pound, solid control on the ground, very strong, young, motivated. And even though he does not have the experience that Charles Oliveira has, he definitely has all the potential. And I really do feel that Arman Tsarukyan is just different than Beneil Dariush. I mean, leading up to Charles Oliveira versus Dariush, I remember many MMA fans had already counted out Charles Oliveira because of his devastating loss to Islam Makhachev. However, at the time, I remember going back to rewatch all of Beneil Dariush's fights in the lead up to this fight, and I concluded that yes, Dariush has a solid right hand. He is powerful, but besides that, he is nowhere near as technical, as versatile, or as powerful as Charles Oliveira. I just saw a slow twitch fighter on the feet in comparison to the top lightweights. I remember MMA fans saying, oh, Beneil's a southpaw like Islam. That will give Charles problems. When Dariush and Islam are nowhere near the same offensively or defensively when it comes to the striking. The fight happened, and many MMA fans coped by saying, oh wow, Charles Oliveira's defense improved so much, when in reality, that was not really true. Dariush did not really show anything dangerous against Oliveira. Oliveira did not really win that fight because of his defense. He won that fight in the same old typical Charles Oliveira style with pressure, precision, power. He wasn't as reckless as he was in that Islam fight by throwing step in, flying knees, and being nowhere in close range to actually land that on Islam. And I feel like every time Charles Oliveira fights, MMA fans sing the same song. Charles Oliveira has a bad chin and bad defense. He's going to get knocked out by blank opponent. I mean, we heard this against Michael Chandler. We heard this against Dustin Poirier. We heard this against Justin Gaethje. We heard this against Islam Makhachev. We heard this against Beneil Dariush. So every time Charles Oliveira fights, you get the point. Everybody is always counting out Charles Oliveira because of his chin, because of the fact that he gets dropped in every fight, the fact that he gets hurt in every fight. And with Charles Oliveira, I'll admit, there's always a chance that he eventually gets put out cold. Charles Oliveira loves to go into the fire. He tries to strike with better strikers like Dustin Poirier, like Michael Chandler, like Justin Gaethje, in fights where he could probably take those fights to the ground and try to grapple in the first round. What does Charles Oliveira do? He decides to strike with these guys. He decides to grapple with grapplers. And I feel like Charles Oliveira, instead of taking the path of least resistance, Charles loves to prove a point, and that really scares me. Oliveira, there's always that possibility that he gets knocked out and put out cold. I mean, there's always that possibility. However, in this video, I'm not going to be giving you guys my prediction. I'm going to be talking about how I believe Charles Oliveira can beat Arman Tsarukyan. And let's first talk about the striking. I believe that this fight is either going to be lost or won on the feet. I think that whoever starts to have success on the feet, whoever starts to dominate on the feet is going to win that fight, whether that be Charles Oliveira or Arman Tsarukyan. I think whoever ends up winning, it's going to be on the feet. However, for Charles Oliveira to win, in my opinion, I think he has to establish his range because he did a very bad job against Islam Makhachev of establishing the range and having good shot selection, where he was throwing, flying kicks and stuff like that when Islam Makhachev is not even in range. He did not really have good shot selection. So sometimes it depends what version of Charles Oliveira we're going to get on fight night. If Charles Oliveira is feeling like himself, if he's calculated and cold, or if he's going to be reckless and impatient like we saw in that fight against Islam Makhachev. But I believe that if Charles Oliveira is able to establish his range against Arman with body kicks, front kicks to the body, I think it is no mystery that Charles Oliveira is going to try to walk down Arman on the feet. And even though some fans might advise against this because, you know, Charles' pressure style, sometimes it gets him caught, sometimes he gets countered, I think this style can actually work against Arman Tsarukyan. And Arman really has not faced a fighter with the pressure of Charles Oliveira on the feet. And Charles Oliveira is going to be the bigger, taller fighter in there. I mean, Charles Oliveira is a pretty big guy for the lightweight division. Definitely going to be bigger than Arman Tsarukyan on fight night. So I think that if Charles Oliveira implements a matador kind of pressure style on Arman Tsarukyan, it could work. You know what I'm saying? It could work. Both of these fighters are fighting from the orthodox stance. So I believe that the straight right hand and the left hook are going to be key against Arman Tsarukyan. I think that, you know, Charles Oliveira has shown that he has a nasty left hook like the one he landed on Michael Chandler. He has a good right hand, and if he lands that right hand over the top, I think he could really hurt Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan hasn't necessarily shown that he has an amazing chin. I don't think he necessarily has a bad chin, but I don't think he has like this Max Holloway, Marvin Vettori kind of chin. You know what I'm saying? So I think there's definitely a real possibility of Charles Oliveira hurting him on the feet. But like I said, Charles Oliveira needs to be precise and have good shot selection like how he did against Beneil Dariush, because if we get the version of Charles Oliveira who's a little bit more reckless, I think it could work against Charles Oliveira, and Arman Tsarukyan could start to have success on the feet. So it all depends on what kind of version we get of Charles Oliveira. I also think that the right calf kick from orthodox was very effective against Chandler. I mean, we saw how Chandler was put off balance. So if Charles Oliveira starts to throw low kicks against Arman Tsarukyan, it could help him. It could help him establish range. So like I mentioned, I think establishing range and having good shot selection is going to be key against Arman Tsarukyan, because Arman Tsarukyan is very explosive, and if he counters you, he could put you out cold because of his speed. You know what I'm saying? I don't think Arman Tsarukyan necessarily has crazy power, and I know he's coming off that knockout over Beneil Dariush, but prior to that, I mean, go rewatch his fights. I mean, he wasn't really able to knock out, you know, Gamrot. I mean, in that fight, he had a lot of success with his kicking game more than his actual hands. And I think Dariush is a very slow twitch fighter. So I'm not surprised that Arman Tsarukyan was able to knock him out in that fashion. But I'm not a firm believer that, you know, Arman Tsarukyan has nasty power with his hands. I mean, he has power to knock out Dariush, but I do not see him catching Oliveira in the same fashion. Oliveira needs to be careful with Arman Tsarukyan on the feet as well, because Arman Tsarukyan, even though I don't think he has the greatest hands, I do believe he has a really good leg kicking game. I mean, he throws axe kicks, he throws really good head kicks from both, you know, orthodox, from the rear leg to the back leg. Like, he throws really good head kicks, really explosive leg kicks. So if Charles Oliveira is not careful, if he's really not defensively sound, I could see, you know, Arman Tsarukyan hurting him with one of those leg kicks. So Charles Oliveira needs to be careful of that. He needs to be aware of that. I don't really see Arman Tsarukyan necessarily knocking him out, but I definitely think it's a factor going into this fight. Could win this fight on the feet because, like I said, he's very precise. He has more power. He's going to be the bigger guy in there. He's also as versatile as Arman Tsarukyan on the feet. So I think that Charles Oliveira has a really good chance of winning on the feet. But like I said, he needs to be precise. He needs to be defensively sound. He cannot just go out there and kind of brawl it out with Arman Tsarukyan and not have good shot selection, because I believe that Arman Tsarukyan is very explosive, very dangerous. And like, even though I don't think he has the best hands, he has a great leg kicking game, and he's definitely improving at this point in his career. I know Arman Tsarukyan has gone out there and said that he wants to knock out Charles Oliveira in this fight. But I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. I think that's total bullshit. I think Arman Tsarukyan is going to look to grapple in this fight. And I hear MMA fans saying, oh, Arman's going to hurt Charles Oliveira on the feet. He's going to be able to submit him just like Islam. Do you guys remember when Arman Tsarukyan got that submission in the UFC? Oh, wait, actually, he has no subs in the UFC. Yeah, Arman Tsarukyan is not going to submit Charles. At least, I do not think it's likely. I mean, Charles Oliveira, he could put guard. He could get a submission off his back. But in my opinion, I would advise Charles to not pulling guard. Look, I know he was able to do that against Dariush. Dariush had pretty bad ground and pound. I mean, he was hitting the canvas so much in that fight. But Arman has really good control from half guard, full guard, side control. He has amazing grappling. And if Arman is in a dominant position, I think it could get very bad for Charles because Arman has pretty nasty elbows. He has a pretty solid ground and pound. So I wouldn't really advise Charles Oliveira to necessarily try to pull guard and fight from his back against Arman Tsarukyan, even though it is possible that he could latch up a submission and submit Arman Tsarukyan off his back. I just don't think it's very likely. I mean, Arman Tsarukyan is also very strong. So, I could see him like even winning in those exchanges. So I think Charles Oliveira needs to be very careful of pulling guard against Arman Tsarukyan. And like, even though I think he's live, he could be very live for a submission. I think it's better if Charles Oliveira is the one grappling. Like if he tries to get to Arman's back and kind of submit him the way he was able to submit Dustin Poirier. Because if you rewatch Arman Tsarukyan versus Gamrot, I mean, in that third round, Gamrot was able to get to Arman Tsarukyan's back. And I mean, even though Arman Tsarukyan did a very good job of fighting the hands and stuff, I mean, we saw that Gamrot was able to get to his back. So if Gamrot is able to get to your back, I mean, Charles Oliveira could absolutely get to your back. And I think he could submit him with a rear naked choke, a standing rear naked choke, the way he was able to submit Dustin Poirier by transitioning to his back, jumping on his back like a monkey, and submitting Arman Tsarukyan. So I think that's very possible. But I don't see Arman Tsarukyan shooting a single or double leg on Charles, especially when Charles has pretty nasty guillotines and anacondas. I think that if Arman takes Charles down, it will be against the fence with a sweep, a body lock, or they might just trip in a striking exchange and the fight will go down to the ground. I could see Charles trying to clinch, landing knees and elbows. So I think Charles Oliveira can win this fight in the grappling, but I think that Arman Tsarukyan is going to be able to neutralize the grappling. I think he's very strong. Obviously, Charles Oliveira has an advantage when it comes to the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And like I just mentioned, Arman Tsarukyan isn't necessarily submitting guys in the UFC left and right. So I think, Arman Tsarukyan could start to win the grappling with control time because, like I said, he has very good control and awareness on the ground. So I don't think it's smart for Charles Oliveira to try to pull guard, even though he could latch up a submission. I just do not like his chances. So I think for Charles Oliveira to win in the grappling, he needs to be the one actually starting the grappling exchanges, and for him to actually defend and try to keep this fight on the feet. And I mean, Charles Oliveira also has a pretty nasty clinch game. He throws pretty good knees, pretty good elbows. But I could see a situation where Charles Oliveira tries to clinch up with Arman Tsarukyan, and Arman Tsarukyan uses that to kind of throw down and slam Charles Oliveira. I could absolutely see that. So I think Charles Oliveira needs to also be very aware in the clinch. So in my opinion, I think the way that Charles Oliveira really wins this fight, and every scenario could be hard, right? Because Arman Tsarukyan is a very well-rounded fighter. He's improving with his striking. He's improving with his grappling. He's improving everywhere. So obviously, Charles Oliveira could have a problem everywhere, but I think Charles Oliveira, I think he could easily win in the striking. I really do believe that if he keeps the fight on the feet, and if he has good shot selection, if he stays patient, he could absolutely hurt Arman Tsarukyan. And once he hurts Arman Tsarukyan, in my opinion, I think it's over for Arman Tsarukyan. I mean, Arman Tsarukyan is probably going to try to, grapple Charles Oliveira, try to take him down once he's hurt. But I think Charles Oliveira could snatch up a submission if he has Arman Tsarukyan hurt. While I believe that if Arman Tsarukyan hurts Charles Oliveira, I think he's going to have to knock him out cold for him to win that fight, or maybe just land ground and pound shots. But I don't really see Arman Tsarukyan submitting Charles Oliveira. So ultimately, guys, this is how I believe that Charles Oliveira can beat Arman Tsarukyan. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree. Make sure to comment down below. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, make sure to follow me on Instagram at TheRealBasedMMA. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.